So I'm going to start off by being very honest. I wish that this wasn't going to be the topic base for this episode, just mainly because it feels like I'm repeating the same exact kind of subject matter for such a long time. Because, just like it's been and it continues to be on this episode is full of misunderstandings. Because I've got a babe who misunderstood a guy's idea of BDSM, I've got a bunch of babes who understood a guy's idea of dating, and I've got a guy who's also misunderstood guys, but more so Kenyan men, in terms of their social and club culture. But I am going to get into all of that in a little bit, but first we must start with our BDSM story. Because, why not start shit off on the wild side of life? Now, there is a 51-year-old man who was left tied up in a forest not too long ago after a sex game with a woman he had met online backfired. And you tend to think about it, if this guy was thinking about getting morning wood, this is probably the most misunderstood way that he could have gotten it, because I don't understand how else this guy would have ended up tied up in the woods by a woman.
Get ready for the battle of the sexes.
Because I'm trying to think of what kind of kink would make you want to go to the forest in the name of a BDSM encounter and get tied up on a tree. Like, how the fuck would you try and explain that? But anyways, let me read the story out for you. So it says, and I quote, "Police in the German town of Beckberg are investigating an incident where a 51-year-old man was left tied up in a forest by a woman he met online. Authorities told the AP news agency that the incident was part of a sex game gone wrong. The man was reportedly tied up by the woman after meeting up in the woods. She is then said to have received a phone call and fled suddenly, leaving the man behind in a helpless state. The 51-year-old told officers that he had a box cutter on him for such situations, quote unquote, but seemed to have underestimated the woman's bondage skills because he was unable to reach the knife, police said. The man was last Wednesday rescued unharmed by a cyclist and a hunter who heard his screams for help. He was discovered fully dressed but firmly bound with ropes and a pair of sheer tights over his head on top of a deer hunting platform. He, however, refused to provide police with information about the woman's identity." End quote. I'm trying to think about this from as open of a view as I possibly can, because I don't know how it is that someone can actually get to the point where they're tied up on a tree by someone who left them, and it's all in the name of sex. You can talk about outdoor sex, but there's better ways to do it. But of all places, a forest? Imagine trying to explain that to people. But actually, let's even take this one step further. If he's 51 years old, let's assume that the guy's married and the wife's been trying to call him and he hasn't been able to answer. Imagine when he finally gets to call the wife back after he's just been rescued, and the wife is like, "Oh my goodness, I've been trying to call you all day. Why can't you call me back? I know you want to have fun with your friends, but why not pick up my phone calls and get back to me?" And this guy has to muster up the courage and be like, "I'm sorry, honey. I was tied up at the time and I couldn't really get to my phone." And now she has to come back with that rebuttal of, No, but even though you're tied up, I'm sure you could have gotten to your phone. Wolfgang is sick and I had to rush him to the hospital, but you couldn't be there to help because you were busy trying to have fun with whoever it is that you are trying to have fun with, and you didn't want me there. Huh? And now dude is like, "No, I'm sorry. I'm honestly trying to tell you the truth. I was tied up and I was in the thick of the woods, but my friends couldn't come and help me because they weren't there, and I just couldn't get to my phone." That would be a very interesting conversation to have with your woman, especially if you were actually cheating on her and now you have to explain this entire thing. It would be wild as hell. But fortunately, considering that this guy hasn't been listed as married, probably he won't have to say such things. And if that's not going to be an issue, then we can get to the door of this podcast, because we need to get in and start things off properly. And just like you'd look at the doormat, it would probably read, "Welcome to Breaktime on West Side, your number one breaktime podcast, coming to you from Nairobi, Kenya. The man on the mic is a man who does not want morning wood next to his morning wood. But I don't mind a bit of morning glory up in there, you know what I'm saying? He's a man who likes his women the same exact way he likes his yogurt. It is none other than your tall, dark, and mildly handsome man, Sir Denverby. The show is Battle of the Sexes, our weekly love, sex, and relationships show where I get to talk about stuff in forests, some of it tied up. Most times I talk about relationships and people can disagree with what I say, but I usually like to come through with some sort of a conclusion. And if you agree with it, if you don't agree with it, if you want to give your feedback of whichever sort, or if you want to suggest an episode, or even say hi, then the place to do it at is at Breaktime on Westside on IG. The DMs are always open. On Facebook, it is also at Breaktime on Westside, and on Twitter, you can slide into my personal DMs, which is at Bagaka the D. And I normally like to check it from time to time, and I usually respond to people. So by all means, you can hit me up there. Also, if you don't really know the spelling to everything, the links are down below in the description. Just figured I should tell you that. Now, I have a situation involving Kenyan men that is full of misunderstanding that I need to clear up right away. But before I do that, I'm gonna play for you guys a clip from a particular podcast in the States where two babes are busy discussing the whole issue of older guys dating much younger babes. And I feel like while they were mostly spot on with what they were trying to say, I do feel like there's something or some things that I felt that were particularly off about the entire thing. But instead of me talking about what should or shouldn't have been said, let me just play it, then I can go into discussing the entire thing. So without further ado,
I met my wife, she was 17. We had no really conversation and no really connection until she was of age. You know, when we did finally start to talk, I was like, this woman is like me. We both love God.
Get the fuck out of here. Any 36-year-old man who says he saw himself and had so much in common with a 17-year-old girl, they haven't paid a goddamn bill but their cell phone in their life. They probably still live with their parents.
You saw it when she was underage. Otherwise, you wouldn't have spun the block. You nasty ass man.
You nasty man.
Young ladies who are 21 and younger. Any man who is above 30 years old, who is not your father, does not have your best interest as their number one priority. I implore you, no matter how intelligent you are, no matter how advanced you are, these men are predators. Any man that will hide behind a veil of God to justify his pursuit of you at that young, tender, vulnerable age is a fucking liar.
So first of all, I want to start by addressing this whole term predatory or just predator, which is a term that gets thrown around so much nowadays and people feel like they know where it's supposed to be used and where it's not supposed to be used. But the reality of it is it's not like a proper definition of sorts and it's a very arbitrary term. Now, the thing with the whole predator logo, or at least the whole predator label, is that it's been thrown around so much that you can't entirely pinpoint why it's supposed to be, because you'll hear it being said about a 21-year-old dating a 40-year-old man. You'll hear it being said about a 19-year-old guy dating a 16-year-old babe, or even vice versa, 16-year-old guy, 19-year-old babe. You'll hear it with an R. Kelly type situation where there's like a 20-something, maybe even 30-year-old man having a thing with a chick who's like 16, 17, 18 years old. And people will throw the term predatory around so much that you can't entirely say what the term predator is. I think it's just thrown to people, more so guys, weirdly enough, that just so happen to be dating someone that is much younger than them. But all that said and done, now to give a bit of context to the entire thing, so they were reviewing a clip where the artist from like back in the 2000s called Marcus Houston was busy talking about his wife and how he met her, and the fact that, he started dating her when she was like 18. They got married pretty soon after, and, they met and they connected pretty quickly. And now, talking about the whole predatory thing and sort of just trying to push the whole like idea of the predator aside, can I really say that the men themselves are predators? I don't entirely think so. Do I think the mindset is particularly off? Yes. That is probably what I'd lean more towards, where I'd be like, the mindset is pretty weird, at least in my opinion, as opposed to using the term that these men are predators. And by all means, with the way the babe was like, no matter how smart you are, no matter how smart you think you are as a 17, 18, 19-year-old, that you don't think that this guy just wants you for something beyond that. But that's sort of a different discussion for a different time. But the reality of it is this sort of mindset has been pushed towards guys for a bit of a while, like mostly because of the red pill community, or at least for those of y'all that don't know what the red pill community, the online super masculine set of guys that are very vocal. They've pushed this whole mindset quite a bit. And these types of guys are the ones that are constantly talking about going for a much younger babe after you've become successful as a guy. And a lot of them will go towards talking about, oh, don't go for these 30-year-old babes. They've been passed around more than blunts and shit. Or they'll talk about how you shouldn't be going for these older women. Go for a very young chick who's in her prime. So like someone who's like the age of 18, 19, 20, 21, 22. To which I'll say that is just weird. At least in my opinion. I think it is particularly weird to a degree because if you've ever interacted with someone who is 18, 19, 20 years old, like most of them are kids. Like there's not that much that's really in them besides hype and social standards. How the fuck are you busy looking at an 18, 19-year-old girl and you're like, you know what, I'm gonna date and possibly marry this shorty? Like, I'm not saying that they're bad, don't get me wrong, and I'm not saying this from a negative point of view. It's just that sort of a mindset on a guy who's like 30s and shit is just weird in my opinion. Because back when I was in uni, like I dealt with two 18-year-old babes. Like during those two times I was 21 and 22, and even during that time I was like, yo, these babes are particularly young, and at the very least they have a bunch of life they have to live. So to think that a guy in his 30s is busy looking at a chick in her teens and is like, I might just marry this babe, I'd probably be having assumptions like dude has a problem with women at a certain maturity level that are around his age, or at least not too far, or the guy probably has some behaviors that he knows women near and around his maturity level and or age just have a problem with, that they know the younger babes won't be able to turn down that quickly. Probably because they don't know that shit, or they're more willing to accept it. But either way, I find that mindset to be particularly odd. And for those of y'all that would want a much better breakdown on the entire thing, I did do a Raw Zone episode on it not too long ago. So you can go check that out, because I am going to leave it at that and move it on to our main topic of today. Now, while I was on IG sometime this past week, I stumbled onto a very interesting reel that was posted up by a guy known as Joe Karaoke. Now, I went and I checked out his profile. Joe Karaoke is, into fitness, tech, travel, and lifestyle. He seems to have traveled quite a little bit here and there, and, I can see a few flags on his page, but that's not the most interesting part. It's actually what he said on the reel that was particularly interesting. And he was actually talking about how when he goes out, he finds that men don't present themselves in the best way. They don't look all sexy, and he doesn't really see us as competition. And initially I thought of just leaving it alone, because I kind of just watched it and I was like, meh. But when I noticed that a bunch of babes are posting it up on their stories, I was like, you know what, this is probably something to be covered, because the babes were like, dude was spitting real facts. But I don't think that that's entirely the case. So I'm gonna play the clip for you, then we can get into it. So here it is.
In Nairobi, I think for me, ever since I got back, it's two things, right? The first one being is, I think men in Nairobi don't really know how to present themselves in a sexy way. I don't know if they don't know or they don't understand. It's very rare that I go out and I see another guy and I'm like, yo, mad respect, props, like that guy's gonna be my competition for the night, right? Whereas on the flip side, right, Nairobi women, y'all are top tier. You all are just in a league of your own. Nairobi women are top tier when it comes to beauty and brains. Honestly, from my experience, I don't think there's any other ethnic or geographically located women that beats Nairobi women. And if you really want to understand what I'm talking about, if you live in Nairobi or you're visiting Nairobi, right, just go to Oysters Bay on a Sunday afternoon, and then you'll understand what I'm talking about when I say that Nairobi women are just basically in a league of their own.
Okay, so first of all, before I go too far and before someone is like, oh, you just focused on the bits that, are relevant to you and you weren't acknowledged. Okay, let me just say it out of the bat. I appreciate the fact that he's appreciating Nairobi women, or more so Kenyan women. Yes, Kenyan women are beautiful and they do look pretty good. At least, a good chunk of them. But all that said and done, like, when I watched this probably like 2, maybe 3 times, the one thing that was just clicking in my head was, dude's definitely traveled, but do we give him time or should we just tell him? Like, that's just one of those questions that just popped up in my head because I'm like, this guy has zero understanding of what the Kenyan social scene, or at least the Kenya club scene, is kind of like in terms of dressing and approaching women and shit. Because even for me, who, by the way, disclaimer, I don't go out very much, I'm not much of a club person, I totally understand why Kenyan guys will do this. And on the other hand, I also get why Kenyan women will dress the way they do. Like, with Kenyan women, you can totally understand that it's not that they're really trying to get approached. A good chunk of them are doing this shit for attention. And a couple of them want a guy that is so whipped because of the look that they've given them with that particular dress that they'd be willing to blow a bunch of cash on, I don't know, maybe drinks on them and shit. But for the most part, it's usually just attention. Like, I've actually chilled with babes who are like, I got this dress because guys are gonna be thirsty at the club when they see me in this dress. Like, they'll pretty much say stuff like that, paraphrased one way or another. But all in all, like, that one's not too hard to figure out. Hell, even with Kenyan guys dressing, it's actually not that hard to figure out. And I think if I give the main reason why Kenyan guys do this, it's probably going to end the entire episode very quickly, but you know what? I'm just gonna say it right out the bat. It's literally just 4 words. Men are functional beings. That's it. And I could end the episode right here and now because the guys would pretty much hear this and they know exactly what I'm talking about. But all in all, you know what? I'm just gonna go ahead and explain why the hell I just said men are functional beings. Now, when you look at guys going to the club, all right, if guys were going to the club trying to pick up babes, then of course they'd probably pay a lot of attention to their dressing if they felt that that's what's going to get them the babe. They'd focus on certain aspects of themselves that would get them the babes, to which I'll tell you, we focus on the places that matter the most and we ignore the places that don't matter as much. Which is why there's like 3 main reasons why guys don't quote unquote present themselves in a sexy way whenever they're going to the club. Now, the first reason, and this is probably the most important reason out of all 3, it's the fact that guys just don't go to the club to pick up babes anymore. Like, trust me. And you can actually go and cross-check this with most Kenyan guys whenever they go to a club. Like, guys aren't going to try and pick up a random babe because if you're trying to do that, there's a pretty good chance that you're gonna be fleeced for cash. You don't know if the babe is gonna spike your drink and steal your shit. And you don't trust that that's not going to be a situation wherever you are. Even though you do trust it, you're probably not going to try and approach a babe at the club because you just might end up being forced, or at least end up feeling like you have to pay for expensive drinks, to which this babe will disappear and you'll be left with your dick in your hands. Like, that's just one of the main reasons why guys just look at it and they're like, you know what, it's actually not worth it. Then on top of that, most of the people that go out to clubs, it's not like they go as individuals, they go as a pack. Like Kenya, and I'll just speak mainly on the Nairobi club scene, people move in cliques and packs. So probably not unless you're talking about a social event like say Gondwana or a Mapiano tour or some shit. Like maybe people can interact there, but for the most part, people move in packs and people in different packs talk to other people in different packs that they know. So if you're in an environment that's all about moving in circles of cliques and everything, then it's going to be a lot harder to try and hit on a babe when you don't know if that's one of the dude in that clique's girlfriend, or even though it's an entire clique of babes, that you'll even get a chance. Because like I once said, you know, hitting on one babe as one babe is a lot harder than hitting on one babe when she's with like 4 of her friends. Just saying. Then secondly, the babes today care a lot less about the look than you think they do. And if you think that I'm lying about this shit, go and look at some of the finest babes whenever they go out to the club and look at the guys that they're probably with as say dates or the boyfriend and shit like that. It's not like they're the best dressed dudes. Hell, some of them are particularly older guys. And one of the things that a lot of us young guys realized over time was that if our uncles who don't dress that great, they'll probably go with a bunch of baggy Calvin Klein jeans, a checkered shirt and a cowboy hat to a club and still pick up babes because they have money, then maybe it's not about showing that you look good, but rather that you can actually hold yourself down pretty well, at least from a financial perspective. Because at the end of the day, it's not like the finest babes who are with guys that blow serious stack on them are with those guys because of their skincare routine. Nothing of the sort. So for most of these guys, yes, you could probably look like a sexy alternative to them, but a lot of these babes will still stick to those guys because those guys are particularly well-to-do, or they just seem to have really, really good connections and shit. Like, at the end of the day, that's the thing that actually matters a lot more than what you currently think presenting yourself in a sexy way is supposed to look like. Then, third and definitely not least, it's better to have your money than to look like you have it, which actually sort of builds on the second point. If you were to check with the babes who it is that's a more preferred candidate between a well-dressed guy that is just barely seeming to do okay for himself and a guy that's making serious bank that goes to a club in a polo shirt that doesn't entirely fit him, a bunch of sweatpants, and maybe a gold chain around his neck, and to show that the guy makes serious bands, came to the club in a V8 or a Range Rover or a G-Class, these babes can talk all the live long day about wanting to be with a guy that dresses well, but they'll still go for the guy in the V8. Because guess what? The guy in the V8 is the guy who can buy the expensive drinks, or so it's assumed. The guy in the V8 is the guy that actually has money, or so it's assumed. The guy in the V8, the guy in the Range Rover, is clearly the guy that can finance the kind of life that she'd want to have, or so it's assumed. And those assumptions are the ones that are going to drive the babes towards the guy that isn't even well dressed. So, if anything, why not focus on the money as opposed to dressing well? And to kind of round all of this, I get it. Dressing well and presenting yourself in a sexy way is actually a good thing. Don't get me wrong. It's a particularly good thing for any person to do, male or female. But when you look at the different things that appeal to people whenever they're going out, and you try to measure things like money, things like how presentable you are in terms of dressing and how you look, you actually realize that for the most part, like at least here in Kenya, or more so in Nairobi, let me just speak on Nairobi, like the money, if it's not there, even though you look good and you've presented yourself well, the chances of you pulling babes is a lot less than if you have money. Like, money has a much bigger factor out here than how you look or how you dress, which is why the kind of car that you came in might actually work more in your favor than how it is that you look or how it is that you dress. But all in all, to kind of conclude all of this, I can kind of get where he's coming from. Especially if you're someone that has probably studied in the States, if you're someone who spent a lot of time in the States, I can get where the whole aesthetics thing comes from. Where it's like guys actually have to dress up in almost the same kind of manner, or at least in almost the same kind of thought process that babes have to dress up. Where it's like you're trying to attract people and you sort of have to start by peacocking first and, hitting on girls at the club. I can understand all of that, and that works there. But here in Kenya, the landscape is a lot different. Guys aren't going to try and pick up babes from the club like that. And guys who are trying to pick up babes from the club aren't particularly trying to get something that is less than, say, a one-night stand or a very casual thing. Of which even that in and of itself isn't something that a lot of guys do. Like, that's just how the club scene is, at least as far as I've been there. So if you think that some guy, just because he's trying to show he has money, is going to wear some velvet example of a pajama just to go to the club and look good, you're gonna be thinking about that shit for a long ass time. Like, most guys, if they have really good money, they probably won't focus on their dressing too much. They'll probably wear the same exact kind of stuff, if not slightly newer, that they know that they can go with for a nice chill time with the boys, or that they can go and like chill and have a meal with a bunch of people with. Like, just something very casual. Like, good looking, but particularly casual. But then again, I might be wrong about this shit, because, I haven't been to clubs in a bit of a while, but I want your thoughts on it. The DMs are open on IG, on Facebook, it is @BreakTime, on Westside, on Twitter, it is @BagakaTheD. Thank you so much for listening all the way till the end, and I will catch you guys on the next break.